This is clip number 9 of the Zalman interview that I did with him in 2010. A very important clip. Here he clearly says when was his transition point when he kind of left Lubavitch to other ways of thinking. So I'd like a little background. You know, there's another part to a person's life. It's called the personal, the familial, the wife, the husband, the mother, the father, the children, the community. Zalman doesn't really go into that at great length, but I know quite a bit about that. And not everything's for public information. However, when a person is having issues in various other areas that we just identified, then it becomes natural to convince yourself that you're transitioning because of an intellectual decision or a revelation, or in this case, he became aware of the Dead Sea Scrolls and he read about it and interested, and he finds out there's other cultures and they're going to get lost. I'm asking you a question, you listener. Why until that moment, why wasn't he interested in the other cultures of the Eidos HaMizrach, the Yemen, and the Sfardim, and the Ashkenazim, and from Rhineland, everything that he says on the clip? Why? Because something was at the time missing in his relationship with Lubavitch. That's to me obvious. And because of that, you seek other pastures, other fields. And they took him to a place which was way beyond the Orthodox Jewish Rhineland, Nusach Ashkenaz, Yemen culture. That's all Orthodox, that's all Torah, that's all from. The Zalman went to other fields. So he talks about the women. And he says that the previous Rebbe, tells us stories showing how important the women are and are part of the tradition and may even make decisions. Thank you very much. Does that equal women singing? Koelisha? No. Does that equal removing the mechitza? No. So obviously, when he talks about transition, I would say it was a transition that was long overdue. And that Reb Zalman, even from his days, and he speaks about his culture in Vienna, the gymnasium, the music, the learning of Latin. I mean, he was a very, very cultured. So that was his basis, his base. At 12 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old, and he brings that to the table in 38 when he meets, these group of people that have been included, and he starts learning, and then he comes to America and he becomes a yeshiva student in 770. If I may say so, it seems to me that he didn't completely eradicate those issues that were contrary to Torah. Okay? He built on them and substituted them for a long while with everything he learned. He says, I think on this clip, or a clip before, he says, the Fardorbene Rabbonim, the Favermte Rabbonim, the wormy rabbis that the Friedrich Rebbe talks about, in the 40s in America, how they were eating treifus, non-kosher, and teaching children in Talmud Torahs, right? And he says, if you listen carefully, he says, and I was behind that. In other words, I was thinking that same way. He was thinking that same way while the ride was a smooth one. As soon as it got rocky, for whatever reason, and it got rocky, then you find other outlets. So meeting people who, are intellectual and bright and have different ideas, that's fine. And he says, I hung out with them. They became my buddies. To be mashpia, but he says also to be mushpa. He says, because it's inevitable not to be affected. Now, what do I mean it's inevitable? Today we have over 5,000 shluchim, and no one has left the fold, right? No one has done what Reb Zalman did. But you're all over. So learn from the culture and ultimately say, Lubavitch is good, but it's not broad enough. It's not really thinking about the non-Jews and different religions, about women and all of that. So this is one aspect of this clip that we have to consider, even though on one hand, it's such an important piece where he says, this is where I made the transition. So he's telling you an insight into himself when he kind of broke away from Lubavitch. At the same time, he does mention some very important things. And one of the things is that the way to impact a person, you must understand them and learn from them. And I would add only those things that coincide with Torah, with mitzvahs, with God, as God instructs a Jew. But the idea to humble yourself and kind of learn from them, the overall idea is correct, as long as the Rebbe said so much in the 50s, and some say he was talking mainly to Reb Shlomo Carlebach and to Reb Zalman, when he spoke about those sichos of not thinking about tachlis and not making compromises in Torah, but make a compromise in yourself. He was talking to them because they were such powerhouses, so influential. People started to gravitate towards them, 55 to 65 and on. The Rebbe spent a lot of time emphasizing the idea a compromise should not be made in Torah but in yourself. I think this is all part of what we need to think about as we listen to this clip number 9.